This is Part 3, Episode 126. Bei said, the 3rd Soul Engineer Legion will be named the 4th Soul Engineer Legion. It'll be composed of 1,500 Soul Masters. Comparatively speaking, this batch of Soul Masters will be of lower cultivations, and they'll only be equipped with one type of Soul tool, our modified all-terrain self-driving fort. Every fort can only carry 5 people. As a result, this Soul Engineer Legion will be equipped with 300 such forts. After hearing such a number, Huiyuhao was astonished. He first thought of the sheer amount of rare metals they needed to produce so many self-driving forts and Zhuge divine crossbow cannons. Bei instantly saw through what he was thinking and took the initiative to answer his doubts before he even posed his question. To conserve resources and increase the speed of manufacture, we've hired blacksmiths from the Heavenly Soul, Doling, and Star Luo empires on high payrolls. They'll proceed with the manufacturing of the outer shells of the cannons and forts. All the metal outer shells will be built using fine iron. Although this can greatly reduce the defensive tenacity and durability of these cannons and forts, it's the only way to manufacture so many soul tools as quickly as possible. According to our estimates, the 3 Soul Engineer Legions should be fully equipped within a year's time. Relentless! This was Huiyuhao's immediate reaction after he heard Bei's words. The Academy is really going all out this time. These 3 Soul Engineer Legions consist of a total of 2,700 Soul Masters, including more than 10 titled Dolor. This is indeed the strength of Shrek Academy. The Sun Moon Empire would never expect them to manufacture the outer shells of such large-scale soul tools using fine iron. After all, soul tools were precious in the sense that they were durable. How could fine iron compare to rare metals? At least, it was unlikely that the Sun Moon Empire would use fine iron to manufacture soul tools. However, the Tang sect was going to do just that. The only advantage that the Tang sect had over the Sun Moon Empire was the mechanical blueprints for the Tang sect's hidden weapons that originated from the ancient Tang sect. Huiyuhao could guess without even asking. Apart from the most critical parts, all of the soul tools they were going to manufacture were likely going to be using fine iron, fine steel, and other ordinary metals. Even though they were also very strong, their strength could only be realized by the Tang sect using those mechanical blueprints. Teacher Xian, you've really tapped into the full potential of the Tang sect. Bei said, now that the first batch of soul tools for the 3 Soul Engineer Legions has been completed, we've been conducting training every day. Perhaps our 3 Soul Engineer Legions aren't strong enough to change the entire situation of the war, but they'll be a force to be reckoned with. When needed, we can attack and defend. Huiyuhao said, eldest senior, I have a suggestion. Bei nodded and answered, go on. Huiyuhao continued, I suggest that we specially divide some people to specialize in manufacturing stationary soul cannon shells. A stationary soul cannon's greatest advantage lies in its effective range. Since we can use fine iron to create the main structure of our soul tools, we can also manufacture cannon shells. As long as we reduce their strength below a certain standard, fine iron and steel should be able to handle them. Bei furrowed his brow and said, we'll only be able to manufacture Class 3 stationary soul cannon shells then. Wouldn't that be too weak? Huiyuhao's eyes flashed and he replied, it might not be. If we thicken the layer of fine iron and steel on the outer shell, we should be able to increase the soul cannons to at least a Class 4 standard. Furthermore, these outer shells can be manufactured by ordinary blacksmiths. We can add a very thin layer of rare metals as the innermost layer. In that case, we should be able to create Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells. Although the destructiveness of a Class 4 stationary soul cannon shell is only roughly at the standard of a Class 5 soul cannon, we'll still be able to gain a very huge advantage in long-range attacks if we have enough of them. They'll be especially useful for aerial soul tools. Given my spirit power, we can specialize in using stationary soul cannons to attack the Sun Moon Empire's aerial surveillance soul tools that within a 10-kilometer radius. Destroying aerial surveillance soul tools doesn't require too much power either. After hearing Huiyuhao's words, Bei nodded repeatedly and said, all right. If you think this is plausible, I'll arrange for you to find Teacher Xian when this meeting is over. After that, you can quickly perform tests and come up with a proposition before we commit to anything. We don't have many soul engineers in the Dolor continent, but we have many blacksmiths. Hire another batch of them. All right. After this, Bei introduced all the details relating to the Tang sect to everyone. There were simply too many matters to deal with in the Tang sect right now. Bei was also very relieved now that Huiyuhao and the rest had returned. At least there would now a bunch of them helping him with all the work. Otherwise, he would have died from fatigue. He wouldn't even have enough time to search for the Blue Silver Emperor. After the meeting was over, Hui Yuhao left the room and was prepared to find Xian Ziwen. After seeing the Death God and learning about some soul tools on the battlefield, he wanted to discuss all of it with him. Hey, wait a minute. Someone called to Hui Yuhao, causing him to turn around perplexedly. He only saw Nan Qiuqiu chasing after him with a grin on her face. What's wrong, Qiuqiu? You're still gloating? Hui Yuhao laughed. Nan Qiuqiu snorted and replied, Am I that sort of person? I'm here to help you. Hui Yuhao was curious as he asked, Help me? Help me with what? Nan Qiuqiu chuckled and said, Do you want to go out and play? I have an idea that will let eldest senior agree to let you go out. What? Hui Yuhao appeared delighted. He didn't really want to leave, but he might have a chance to bump into Wang Donga if he left Shrek City. Hui Yuhao was doubtful as he asked, What idea could you have? Nan Qiuqiu snorted and said, You just need to agree to one of my conditions before I'll bring you along. What's the condition? Tell me. Hui Yuhao asked. Nan Qiuqiu paused for a moment and she turned slightly red. After that, she answered, I want you to be my boyfriend for a few days. What? Hui Yuhao was stunned for a moment. He was a little embarrassed as he looked at her and shook his head helplessly before turning around and leaving. Hey! Nan Qiuqiu stomped her foot in anger. Am I that annoying? Can't you even pretend to be my boyfriend? Hui Yuhao shook his head and replied, I'm sorry, Qiuqiu. We can negotiate other things, but I can't accede to this request of yours. You should know my feelings for Donga. If I agree to your request, I'll be hurting you. That won't be good for either of us. I'm really sorry. You're a nice lady, and I'm sure you'll find your Prince Charming in the future. I'll go and find Teacher Xian first. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Of course, Hui Yuhao could sense the feelings that Yi Gai and Nan Qiuqiu had for him. It was just that he was overly sad because of what had happened to Wang Donga and Wang Qiu'er, and really didn't wish to associate himself with anyone else. If he were more determined when Wang Qiu'er got close to him, the tragedy might not have happened. This was why he was now very disciplined with regards to matters of the heart. Even though Tang Wutong looked almost identical to Wang Donga, he still decided to immediately steer clear from her after verifying that she wasn't Wang Donga. He didn't want to give her and himself the wrong impression. She had her own feelings. When a guy and a girl stayed around each other too much, it was inevitable that feelings would grow between them. Hui Yuhao didn't wish for such a situation to happen. This was why he rejected Nan Qiuqiu so readily. Perhaps this might hurt her in the short term, but it was better than hurting her after she was even more emotionally involved. Humph. Guys are all so heartless. I don't want any Prince Charming. Don't leave. Let me finish talking first. Nan Qiuqiu was fuming as she pursued Hui Yuhao, stopping him in his tracks. Hui Yuhao sighed slightly and asked, Qiuqiu, what else do you want? She snorted and said, It's a good thing for you. I still have to chase you for this. But you're so unwilling. Hui Yuhao was apologetic, I'm sorry, Qiuqiu. Ever since Qiu'er left and Donga fell into a coma, I've not been feeling very good. If there's anything that I've done to offend you, please forgive me. Nan Qiuqiu glared at Hui Yuhao and said, Do you know how much I hate you? It's always like this, acting so kind and treating others as outsiders. Even if you can't be my boyfriend, can't you at least be an ordinary friend? As she spoke, her eyes had already turned red. Hui Yuhao's heart softened and he said, We've always been friends. We're even partners, even closer than ordinary friends. Nan Qiuqiu's expression became milder and she said, That's more acceptable. All right, I shall not delay you. I'll get straight to the point. Do you remember my mom mentioning that there's a mysterious place where the Earth Dragon sect is that she wishes to give to the Tang sect? Hui Yuhao was moved and he said, Yes, Elder Nan did mention it before. Why? Haven't we gone to retrieve it yet? Nan Qiuqiu said, One look and I can tell that you didn't fully understand her words. My mom was telling you that the place is likely to be accessible only to you. As the temperature inside is extremely low, ordinary soul masters can't possibly survive inside, much less venture deep into it. According to the information that our ancestors left behind, there's likely to be a mine inside. This mine is also very strange, it's extremely cold inside. We can only predict that there's some kind of rare metal inside, but we can't tell how rare it is. If you're interested, you can go and take a look since you've nothing much to do now and the war situation has more or less stabilized. If you retrieve rare metals, you can bring some of them back. So it's about this matter. Hua Yuhao finally understood, and said with gratitude, "Thanks, Chiu Chiu. I'll return and ask eldest senior for permission first." Nan Chiu Chiu nodded and said, "All right, I'll go and find my mother too. I'll ask if she's free within this period of time." "Hi, our sect's territory has already been occupied by the Sun Moon Empire. If we return, we must be careful too." Hua Yuhao smiled and said, "No worries, it won't be some kind of death trap. We've already overcome the death god. Do we need to be afraid of ordinary soldiers from the Sun Moon Empire?" Nan Chiu Chiu laughed and said, "Eldest senior just lectured you, but you've already gone back to your old ways. Aren't you afraid that I'll report you to him?" Hua Yuhao laughed, "I'm not afraid. You aren't that kind of person. You're the most loyal." Nan Chiu Chiu snorted and said, "It seems like we can only be good brothers in this life." Hua Yuhao chuckled, "It's great to be good brothers. See, I'm so good to my brothers. All right, I'll find Teacher Xian first. We'll talk when we get back." In the next few days, Hua Yuhao was completely busy. His discussion with Xian Ziwen took 6 hours before he invested his energy into developing stationary soul cannon shells. Xian Ziwen handed this job to him. If it were Xian Ziwen, he would find it very easy to complete this task. As for the Earth Dragon sect, Bei Bei allowed him to proceed there after he was done with this task. During the breaks in his experiments, Hua Yuhao wanted to make a trip to the Sea God's Island and ask Elder Xian about a problem he had faced during his cultivation. It was just that he found it difficult to turn his attention away from his experiments after he started on them. He only found the time after he completed all his experiments. After the Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells were completed, they were only 2/3 as strong as normal Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells. However, their effective range was almost the same. This was the result of the materials used. Furthermore, Xian Ziwen was already very pleased that they could make it this far. Hua Yuhao had used a few techniques in their construction. Amongst them, the most important technique was the delayed activation component of the stationary soul cannon shells. When such cannon shells were fired, they normally relied on the thrust at their tail ends to reach far away before exploding. The components that gave them their thrust and power had to be separated using a strong rare metal. The stronger a cannon shell was, the more precious the rare metal needed to separate the components. However, Hua Yuhao went against conventional logic this time in his design. He used a new activation technique. First, as these soul cannon shells were specially designed for Sugar Divine crossbows, Hua Yuhao fully tapped into their thrusting force. The cannons were able to fire the cannon shells around 2 kilometers in distance. If the shells were detonated within these 2 kilometers, a lot of energy is undoubtedly wasted. Hua Yuhao didn't separate the components but placed them together in the same compartment. At the bottom of the cannon shells, he used some mechanical principles and created a delayed activation component. When these shells were fired by the cannons, they would automatically be activated. However, as it didn't have the thrust component, the power component should directly blow apart. However, with the delayed activation component, the power component was meant to blow apart after some time. It would take a few seconds. Within these few seconds, the shell would have flown more than 2 kilometers away. When the power component was about to be detonated, the central detonation component would take effect. The power component was divided into 2 parts. One of these parts was the second thrust component. This second thrust component would increase the speed of the shell once again, reaching the speed of an original Class 4 shell and flying far away. Due to the initial propulsion, it just needed to increase the speed of the shell. In this way, a lot of energy was conserved. Although the strength of the power component was slightly reduced as it was smaller, it was important to remember that the outer shell and mechanical components were made completely from fine iron. It was already very difficult to achieve this. Such a cannon shell would be 2/3 as strong as usual, but its cost would only be 1/10 of normal. This was not even including the fact that some rare metals couldn't be found on the market. It was indeed possible to mass-produce such cannon shells. Of course, Hua Yuhao's research only went this far. Stronger stationary soul tools couldn't be manufactured in this way. This was because they were too strong, and needed rare metals for their outer shells. However, adopting this method would undoubtedly help to conserve resources. He had finally finished. Hua Yuhao reported his results to Bei Bei and was excited as he sat in the chair in front of Bei Bei, gulping down water. He was completely tired out over the past half-month. Bei Bei couldn't help but smile when he saw Hui Yuhao's excited look. After Hui Yuhao and the rest returned, they had helped him with a lot of work. He had been much more relaxed over the past half-month. Yuhao, when are you planning to leave since the experiments are done? Bei Bei asked. Hui Yuhao was puzzled as he asked, leave? Where to? Bei Bei was speechless and said, your memory is failing you. Have you forgotten what you promised Qiu Qiu? They are helping us. We can't delay any further. Go and take a look. If it's some kind of precious rare metal, bring it back. Hui Yuhao recalled his conversation with Nan Qiu Qiu that day and was embarrassed as he scratched his head. All right, eldest senior. I'll go over in a day or two. Bei Bei said, all right, you can go in 2 days' time. You should also rest over these 2 days. You can't spend all your time researching in the future. Look at teacher Xian. He's a soul tool maniac right now. Xian Ziwen had become the busiest person in Shrek City. However, it was weird. He managed to become a titled dolor amidst all his business. Recently, he was researching his special Class 9 soul tool. Once his research was over, he would become a true Class 9 soul engineer. He would even be stronger than most ordinary Class 9 soul engineers. Hui Yuhao chortled and said, I can't rest. I had some doubts during my cultivation earlier. I still need to ask Elder Xian about them. Eldest senior, I'll leave first if there's nothing else. I'll go to the Sea God's Pavilion straight away. If you want to find me, ask someone to go over there to call me over. After he finished, he quickly rushed out. To him, every minute was precious. His soul power had increased by another rank over the past half-month. He was now a Class 74 Control-type Soul Sage. This increase was a result of his accumulation, as well as his research into the soul power of the Beast God. As he was busy performing experiments, Hui Yuhao didn't manage to improve in his earlier cultivation. But now that the experiments were over, it was time for him to work towards improvements in that area. Yuhao, wash up before going. Bei Bei smiled as he called out to Hui Yuhao from behind. All right. Hui Yuhao acknowledged his words before he disappeared. Bei Bei wore a smile on his face and shook his head helplessly. He gently leaned back in his chair. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He pulled the drawer in front of him open and took out a small jade box. Pinkish lights flashed inside this box. It was given to him by the delicate Silk Immortal, and it was one of the 2 valuable treasures needed to save Tang Ya. However, the only problem was that the Blue Silver Emperor had yet to surface until now. Xiao Ya, where are you? How are you doing? Bei Bei's expression turned gentler as he thought of her. However, he was deeply worried. It had already been so long since he had received any news of Tang Ya. Without a doubt, she must have been completely influenced by those evil soul masters and lost her awareness. Bei Bei really wanted to risk everything to find her. He had already secretly decided in his heart that he was going to leave the Tang sect to find her after the 3 soul engineer legions were fully equipped. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to bring her back safely even if he couldn't find the Blue Silver Emperor. Hui Yuhao quickly went to Shrek Academy after leaving the Tang sect. The academy was considered to be in the inner city now. Although Shrek City had expanded, Shrek Academy hadn't. They only added an extra experimental ground outside of the Soul Tool department. Now that war had begun on the continent, even Shrek Academy wasn't completely safe. Apart from the students who were already in the academy, the number of new students was decreasing. If Shrek Academy was already like that, there was no point talking about other academies. Hui Yuhao went straight to Sea God's Island after entering the academy. When he was outside the Sea God's Pavilion, he first kowtowed to the golden tree before going in to find Elder Xian. Elder Xian looked much better than he had the last time they had met. He directly brought Hui Yuhao to his room to talk to him. Elder Xian. Hui Yuhao was delighted as he rushed in front of Elder Xian. My experiments have succeeded. We can start manufacturing low-tier Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells now. If we make them in batches, we should be able to surprise the Sun Moon Empire. Elder Xian was in awe as he said, Oh? You've actually succeeded? You're indeed a genius. It's only been a few days, but Yuhao has already completed such crucial research. It's even something the Sun Moon Empire can't replicate. After Hui Yuhao started researching, Bei Bei had already reported his idea to Elder Xian during their regular meetings at the Sea God's Pavilion. Shrek Academy was no longer peaceful after the war started. The conference of the Sea Gods Pavilion was meant to be annual, but it was now changed to regular monthly meetings. If there were other special situations, more of such meetings had to be organized. Don't tire yourself out, Yu Hao. You look so worn out. Elder Xian smacked the dust off his shoulders and said concernedly. Hui Yu Hao laughed in embarrassment. Bei Bei's warning fell on deaf ears. He was excited after completing his experiments and was eager to tell Elder Xian everything about the mysteries of soul power. Elder Xian, wasn't I possessed by the beast god Di Qian when I was resisting Elder Yi Shishui? Then, the beast god poured in his strength into my body from afar through spatial power. He descended using my body. Even though my passageways were damaged following that, I managed to understand some certain traits of Di Qian's soul power. When I did my research after that, I found out something strange. Hui Yu Hao recounted his discoveries, along with the details of his experiments to Elder Xian. Elder Xian was still smiling when he first started, and nodding his head from time to time. He was very pleased with Hui Yu Hao's curiosity. However, his expression slowly changed as he continued to listen. He performed high-pressure compression on his soul power and controlled it outside his body, creating a spatial distortion and allowing him to imitate Di Qian's black hole soul power. This kid is too brazen. Elder Xian, whatever knowledge the Academy taught before only applies to Soul de Luo and below. There's no other knowledge beyond Soul de Luo. When one becomes a title de Luo, what kind of changes will happen to his soul power? Is Di Qian's black hole soul power only applicable for ultimate de Luo? In other words, is he the only one with knowledge of it? Although they are both ultimate de Luo, Di Qian was evidently stronger than Elder Yi Shishui. If Yi Shishui doesn't use the death god, she won't be Di Qian's match in a direct confrontation. Elder Xian silently nodded. He sighed before saying, I didn't expect you to reach this level so quickly. Since you've asked, I guess it's fine that I tell you. You aren't wrong. When a soul master becomes a title de Luo, his soul power will transform from its original fluid state to a solid state. That's the rank 90 bottleneck, and the soul master will obtain his 9th soul ring to become a title de Luo. This is a very difficult bottleneck to break through for most soul masters. This is why there are so many soul de Luo, but a scarcity of title de Luo. There's a very big problem when one's soul power changes from a fluid state to a solid state. It's very difficult to cultivate soul power in the solid state. Let's not talk about those soul de Luo who can't transform to become a title de Luo. Let's only talk about title de Luo. You've already sparred with many title de Luo. Have you ever realized that even title de Luo of the same rank can actually differ a lot in their abilities? Hui Yu Hao immediately nodded and said, yes. I've discovered this point. Isn't this because of one's martial soul? Elder Xian smiled and said, that's right. It has some relation to one's martial soul. The stronger one's martial soul is, the better he is able to unleash the strength of it when he combines it with his soul power. However, you might know about something. The stronger one's martial soul is, the greater the amount of soul power during cultivation. This is because one's martial soul can contain a part of his soul power. The stronger a martial soul, the greater the amount of soul power it can store. One can store a portion of his soul power in his martial soul. Hui Yu Hao was astonished. He really did not know about this. Elder Xian smiled and said, yes. You should be realizing it now. A soul master can unleash his martial soul true body if he's at least a soul sage. His martial soul true body can help him to store some of his soul power. You'll only learn such knowledge in the academy if you're at least a soul sage. You didn't realize it because the amount of soul power you have is already greater than other soul masters at the same rank. Don't forget, you have twin martial souls. Hui Yu Hao pondered, then asked, does this mean that it is very difficult for a title de Luo to improve further when his soul power reaches a solid state? Elder Xian smiled and nodded lightly, that's right, you're correct. The reason is also very simple. If your soul power is in the gaseous or liquid state, it can flow inside your body. Now, let me ask you, can your soul power still flow if it's in a solid state? Hui Yu Hao was stunned for a moment and subconsciously shook his head. Yes. How can one's soul power flow inside his body if it's in a solid state? Elder Xian said, your research is going in the right direction. In fact, the situation that you've laid out is exactly the soul core that only appears for title de Luo. It refers to the core of soul power, the foundation of a title de Luo. Soul power is compressed from a fluid state to a solid state, which is then immersed in the dantian of a soul master. That is the soul core. The soul core evolves continuously, and will absorb external soul power through the soul master for the soul master to use. Whether it is in terms of fighting strength or recovery ability, the soul master will be stronger than before. However, it is much more difficult to improve once one's soul power solidifies compared to when it's in the fluid or gaseous state. This is because a human can't possibly circulate solid soul power through his body. This is why a human can only dissect the solid soul power in his body into beads before controlling the circulation of his soul power in the gaseous or fluid state. Not only is this process difficult, but it is also very dangerous. As a result, some soul masters who didn't think that they were talented would give up on further improvements after they became titled Dolor. They would remain at rank 91. This is very safe for them. It's actually so complicated? Hui Yuhao was shocked when he heard that. Elder Xian continued, saying, however, it's not entirely true that soul power can't circulate in one's body in the solid state. If a soul master's spiritual power is strong enough that he can control the beads of soul power to appear in the gaseous or fluid state, he can naturally circulate his soul power. Given this, solid, fluid and gaseous states could possibly exist together. To control one's soul power at this level, one can only be a transcendent Dolor. As a result, after becoming a transcendent Dolor, cultivation might actually become easier. At least there's a correct cultivation method. Of course, transcendent Dolor would still find it difficult to improve. There's a limit to how much soul power a human body can handle. It can still be compressed in the gaseous or fluid state, and it is already highly compressed in the solid state. It can no longer be further compressed. In order to allow one's body to handle more soul power, it comes down to the question that you asked earlier, why does Di Qian's soul power contain such strong spatial power? Di Qian has an 800,000-year cultivation. Although he has not lived in this world for 800,000 years, he has still lived much longer than us. Throughout his entire life, he has been understanding the mysteries of space and time, granting him his current cultivation. No one on the continent can compare to him in this aspect. His soul power, which is every little black hole that you saw, contains an immense amount of compressed soul power. It is stored in his body using time and spatial power, which enables him to handle it. Once a fight breaks out, he can unleash immense fighting strength by controlling his soul power. My current soul power is rank 98. All these years, I've been troubled by how to control that spatial power and stabilize it after compressing my soul power. I can perform some simple control of spatial power. Come, take a look. As he spoke, Elder Xian stretched out his hand, and a ball of yellow light appeared out of nothing in his palm. It was a yellow ball of light, which looked very real. There were thin spatial cracks around it. Earth-type soul power. This was clearly Elder Xian's solidified soul power. Elder Xian's eyes brightened. Suddenly, the spatial cracks that surrounded the ball started to widen, and the ball started to collapse inward. A small black hole was formed. A terrifying suction force dragged Hui Yuhao toward it, and he almost knocked into Elder Xian. After that black hole formed, it started to revolve at high speed. The origin energy in the air started to be sucked into the black hole. The yellow light on Elder Xian's body became more intense. The little black hole stabilized as it was surrounded by a layer of gentle yellow light. It stopped spinning faster, but revolved at a constant speed. This is roughly how it is in Di Qian's body. He uses his own soul power to cause a collapse in space, forming a black hole that can devour origin energy. Theoretically speaking, this black hole can continuously devour origin energy. However, there would be instability if I can't control it, which would eventually lead to an explosion. I heard Elder Mu mention that if an ultimate Dolor can complete a black hole and maintain it at a limit that he can handle, the black hole would be able to remain indefinitely. In that case, this black hole can even devour our entire continent. Of course, such a possibility is very rare. Elder Mu was only making deductions too. Such a black hole soul power would require immense spiritual power to be controlled. After it's controlled, it can be absorbed into one's body. I can complete such a process, but I can't transform my soul power in that way like Di Qian. Currently, there's only one black hole of soul power in my body right now. It's my soul core. The soul power that's flowing in my body is still existing in 3 states. If I can transform 1/10 of the soul power in my body into a black hole, I can create a second black hole soul core, possibly in my chest or brow, thereby becoming an ultimate Dolor. However, it's not easy. I've already tried many times, but I've always missed by a bit. Compared to substituting my soul power, creating a second soul core is easier. Elder Mu and Long Xiaoyao both took this path. I think Yi Shishui did the same too. Only Di Qian took a different path. This is why he is much stronger than most ordinary ultimate Daluo. Furthermore, I suspect that Di Qian has a second soul core. His abilities are already close to that of a god. If you're human, he might have been accepted by the godly realm already. Huo Yuhao listened very seriously. To him, such knowledge was simply too important. This has also allowed him to clearly see his future path of development. Elder Xian smiled and said, Yuhao, it's much easier for you to become an ultimate Daluo compared to us. This is because you have twin martial souls. Remember, you must aim to achieve double soul cores the moment you become a titled Daluo. As long as you can form black holes with those two soul cores, you can easily overcome the barrier to becoming an ultimate Daluo. Hi, it's a pity that time is not on our side. If you had another 30 years to become an ultimate Daluo, why would we be afraid of Yi Shishui and Long Xiaoyao? An ultimate Daluo with twin martial souls would be much stronger than both of them. You could even possibly challenge Di Qian. Huo Yuhao said, Elder Xian, how can soul power be stabilized as it transforms into a black hole? In my experiments, I found myself losing control before the revolution of my soul power had generated sufficient spatial power. The key lies in my fear. I feared that I would suffer some kind of backlash once I lost control. This is why I don't even know what my limit is. Elder Xian laughed and said, Fool, don't be too ambitious. You're only a soul sage right now. Even though you have twin martial souls, you're still a soul sage. You can't possibly form a soul core right now. However, you have a very great advantage over other soul masters. Because of this advantage, I'm confident that you can directly form double soul cores when you become a titled Daluo. Are you talking about my spiritual power? Huo Yuhao immediately understood what Elder Xian meant. Elder Xian nodded and replied, That's right, it's your spiritual power. Your spiritual power is greater than most other ordinary soul masters, comparable to a titled Daluo. There are very few spiritual-type soul masters, but a spiritual-type titled Daluo will most certainly become a transcendent Daluo. This is because spiritual-type soul masters have greater control than most ordinary soul masters. It's fine for you to carry out such experiments right now. At least you'll get to accumulate experience. However, don't be too fixated on it. You can't help it if your abilities aren't up to par. As your soul power is insufficient, you can't possibly compress all your soul power inside your soul core when you change it from the fluid to the solid state. The bigger the soul core, the stronger the titled Daluo. Huo Yuhao was moved, and asked, Elder Xian, if I try to form a soul core right now, what might happen? Elder Xian was stunned for a moment, then smiled. First, it's almost impossible. While your control might be strong, it's very difficult to control spatial power. If things go wrong, you'll be causing your own death. During the process of carrying out soul power compression, the demands on a soul master's physical tenacity are very great. One's body is like a container that stores soul power, whereas the transformation of soul power from a fluid to a solid state will generate immense energy. If your body isn't strong enough, you'll blow apart and die. This is why you can't just try for fun. Assuming you really succeed, your future cultivation is bound to increase significantly. A solid soul core absorbs origin energy at a much faster speed than your meditation right now. However, what will happen when you reach rank 90? You already have one soul core and you can't possibly compress all your soul power inside it. When you reach rank 90, you'll need to attempt the compression of your second soul core. It's only in this way that you'll become a titled Daluo. However, your soul core will definitely appear in your Dantian. There's a very high possibility that your first soul core will form in your Dantian as well. There's also a possibility that you can form two at the same time. However, if there's already one soul core in your Dantian, you'll have to take a look at my condition if you want to form a second soul core somewhere else. Elder Xian was a little helpless as he pointed to himself. Huo Yuhao understood what he meant. According to Elder Xian, assuming that he did the impossible and formed a first soul core, it would be as difficult for him to form a second soul core as it was to become an ultimate Daluo from a rank 98 transcendent Daluo. I understand. Thank you. Huo Yuhao nodded gently. Elder Xian said, Didn't you say you wanted to challenge your limits earlier? You can try. I'll watch over you. I would also like to see how good your control is. I suggest you try with 1/10 of your soul power. When your soul power reaches the solid state and continues to increase until you feel like you can't control it anymore, I'll be here. Don't worry. I'll ensure your safety. Hui Yuhao was delighted. Thanks, Elder Xian. Shall I start now? Yes, you can start now. Hui Yuhao first calmed himself down and adjusted his state of mind. He shut his eyes, and his spiritual power started to flow. He also checked his soul power in his body. Elder Xian stood by one side and silently nodded. This kid is still as composed as ever. He's not lost his cool at all. When Hui Yuhao opened his eyes again, his eyes were already covered with a layer of gold. He slowly lifted his right hand, and his milky white soul power started to flow out. As his soul power was in the fluid state, it looked like a puddle of milk in his palm. None of his soul power seeped out of his hand as he controlled it using his spiritual power. More and more of his soul power started to appear and drift above Hui Yuhao's palm. It was slowly revolving. This time, Hui Yuhao had poured out more soul power than he did the previous 2 times in his experiments. With Elder Xian protecting him, he naturally didn't need to worry too much. Under his control, the circulation of his soul power started to increase in speed. At the same time, it also started to slowly compress. During the process of compression, Hui Yuhao slowly increased the input of his soul power. His fluid soul power started to become viscous, but its speed kept on increasing under Hui Yuhao's intentional control. There was a layer of gold surrounding his white soul power. It was this layer of gold that protected his soul power from seeping away. If it were any other 7-ringed soul master, his soul power would quickly vaporize if he let his soul power out of his body just like that without using any soul skills. After vaporizing, his soul power would then vanish into the air. Elder Xian nodded in approval as he watched Hui Yuhao's control of his spiritual power. Even though this didn't drain too much of his spiritual power, there was a very great demand on detail. It wasn't easy for Hui Yuhao to do something like this. His soul power was slowly transforming from the fluid to the solid state. Hui Yuhao's expression also started to turn serious. However, his soul power didn't shift in the slightest under his control. It continued to constantly revolve. It had finally transformed into the solid state. It was very difficult to imagine a soul sage doing this. Elder Xian was in awe, and also became more focused. He was ready to react to any situation. Hui Yuhao's soul power kept on compressing and revolving. Slowly, his solid soul power took form. The little funnel that Hui Yuhao was familiar with appeared. As he had poured more soul power into it this time, the appearance of the funnel caused a greater suction of origin energy from outside compared to before. The terrifying suction force directly spread outward. Inside the sea god's pavilion, origin energy was in abundance. Suddenly, Hui Yuhao felt as if the energy from this little whirlpool had increased at a rate that was at least twice as quick compared to the previous 2 experiments. Distorted lights around his solid soul power started to become more and more evident. The intense suction force didn't just suck in origin energy. It was also absorbing Hui Yuhao's own soul power. Hui Yuhao had no choice but to continuously pour his soul power into it to enhance the strength of his solid soul power. Very good, continue. Don't worry. Let me see what standard you can reach. Elder Xian's voice sounded in Hui Yuhao's ears, alleviating his worries. However, he didn't immediately increase the output of his soul power. Rather, he allowed his soul power to absorb the soul power in his body. At the same time, he kept on strengthening the control of his spiritual power in a bid to maintain the stability of his solid soul power. Elder Xian had mentioned before that he had to maintain the stability of his solid soul power if he wanted to make it his soul core. Once stability was lost, a huge explosion would ensue. That would be very perilous. Under Hui Yuhao's intentional control, his solid soul power started to stabilize, as well as continuing to strengthen. The surge of origin energy also became faster and faster. Hui Yuhao even saw dim gold appearing on the walls in the room. The golden tree was absorbing origin energy from the outside world just as it was pouring out origin energy. This went to show that Hui Yuhao's solid soul power was absorbing origin energy at an immensely quick rate. Elder Xian's body lit up with a layer of dim golden light, isolating him from the outside world. This was because Hui Yuhao's solid soul power was already starting to absorb his own soul power. However, Elder Xian was able to isolate it, given that there was a huge difference in their cultivations. A mysterious look slowly appeared across Hui Yuhao's face. On his forehead, his eye of destiny had already slowly opened. He increased the output of his spiritual power once again and continued to control the revolution of his solid soul power with stability. Seconds passed, and more than half of Hui Yuhao's soul power had already fused into this solid soul power. he also started to feel that he was slowly losing control of the revolution of this solid soul power. His spiritual control was still maintaining its stability. However, it was impossible for him to stop it anymore. If he did so, there would only be one result, an explosion. Hui Yuhao's spiritual power didn't weaken in the slightest as he continued to pour out his soul power. Elder Xian was stunned to discover that the spiritual power surrounding the solid soul power was getting stronger and stronger. It had even turned from the original gold to rose gold. It was as if a layer of solid spiritual power existed and perfectly maintained the stability of the solid soul power. His spiritual power is really strong. It seems like I have underestimated the strength of his spiritual power. It is much stronger than I expected. Perhaps this kid's spiritual cultivation has improved recently. Elder Xian was right. After experiencing the war between the Star Luo Empire and Sun Moon Empire, Hui Yuhao was even personally involved in a fight between Ultimate Dolor. His body had suffered critical injuries, but he had developed a deeper understanding of spiritual aspects. After all, the spiritual power of two Ultimate Dolor was stronger than his. Under the kind of pressure that he faced, his spiritual power naturally grew as it was stimulated. At this tier, even a minor increase in his spiritual power was still considered a huge improvement. The terrifying soul power undulations continued, and Hui Yuhao started to find it a little overwhelming. He could still hold on in terms of his spiritual power, but the solid soul power was absorbing his soul power at a faster speed, just as the amount of soul power in his body was less than that in the form of the solid soul power. Hui Yuhao only felt as if the soul power in his body was rushing out, whereas the revolution of the solid soul power had reached a speed that he couldn't see properly even with his spirit eyes. 50%, 60%, 70%. When more than 70% of his soul power had been absorbed from his body, Hui Yuhao already couldn't control the output of his soul power. What he couldn't see was that the entire Sea God's Pavilion had already let out dim golden light. Above the Sea God's Pavilion, origin energy had already formed clouds in the air. Immense origin energy continuously gathered in the direction of the golden tree. Some of the elders in the Sea God's Pavilion were awakened from their cultivation at this moment. How could they possibly not notice such a great disturbance in the pavilion? Is someone trying to become a transcendent Dolor? This was their immediate reaction. This was because something as strange as this only appeared when someone was trying to form a soul core. After this, they discovered that the core of all the soul power undulations came from Elder Xian's room. To them, this wasn't considered a very impressive level of soul power undulations. Instead, they thought that the undulations were a little weak. There should be a greater disturbance if it was a title Dolor trying to become a transcendent Dolor. However, they weren't worried, since everything was happening in Elder Xian's room. After observing for a while, they all returned to meditate. The concentrated origin energy in the air was also very beneficial to their cultivation. However, the prerequisite was that they had to create a barrier around themselves to prevent their soul power from being sucked away. 80%. More than 80% of Hui Yuhao's soul power had already been devoured. Right now, he needed to use a portion of his spiritual power to control his entire body so that his soul power would leak out at a slower speed. Perspiration had already drenched his forehead, and he started to look paler and paler. However, Elder Xian was very impressed that Hui Yuhao was still able to stabilize and control the solid soul power even under such conditions. He didn't let it shift at all. At this moment, something strange happened. The original milky white solid soul power started to change color, it turned a dim gold. Furthermore, this golden color was intensifying. After seeing this, Elder Xian was astonished. He lifted his head to look at Hui Yuhao. Although Hui Yuhao was already finding it very tough right now, he was still trying his best to hold on. Yuhao, hang on. Your solid soul power is starting to develop elemental characteristics. Perhaps you can really construct a soul core. Your situation is different. If you manage to construct a soul core right now, you might actually reach the rank 89 bottleneck in a much shorter period of time. Although it's still difficult to become a title Dolor, this might be your opportunity. Hang on. After hearing Elder Xian's words, Hui Yuhao was slightly stunned. He continued to use his spiritual power to control the remaining soul power in his body from being sucked out too quickly. This was because the solid soul power was not just absorbing his soul power, it was also absorbing the origin energy in the air. If it sucked less soul power from him, it could absorb more of the origin energy in the air. In addition, Hui Yuhao had the deepest sense of this solid soul power since he was the one who had created it. He could clearly feel that the development of elemental characteristics was on the spiritual level. This meant that this solid soul power contained the spiritual power of his spirit eyes. It was fusing with his first martial soul. His spiritual power kept on growing. His soul power couldn't compare to a title d'honneur, but his spiritual power could. Under the effect of his Eye of Destiny, he continued to let out more spiritual power from his body. His Eye of Destiny also turned rose gold. An aura of destiny also started to appear as he let out his spiritual power. The revolution of his solid soul power continued to speed up. It was slowly turning golden. Apart from the immense soul power undulations, there were also decently strong undulations of spiritual power that appeared. The spiritual power that Hui Yuhao unleashed to protect the solid soul power had even stuck to it and started to be devoured. At this moment, the solid soul power slowed down in its suction of origin energy from the air and Hui Yuhao's soul power. This gave Hui Yuhao an opportunity to catch his breath. I must hang on. Hui Yuhao recognized that his abilities were lacking as he faced off against stronger individuals. He was clearly aware that his current cultivation was still not good enough to challenge individuals of higher cultivations. He had to work hard in his cultivation and increase his abilities right now. Elder Xian had mentioned that this was a great opportunity, which was also what he had thought earlier. As for a future, second soul core, it wasn't impossible for him to form it even if it was difficult. In addition, he had another thought. If he could hang on and wait until his solid soul power formed a soul core, it might even be a stepping stone for him to form a second soul core in the future. The golden color turned more and more intense. The aura of his spirit eyes had already completely immersed into his solid soul power. However, Hui Yuhao's soul power had already been drained such that there was only a little left over. He gritted his teeth and hung on. However, he couldn't just hold on because of the void in his body. He was trembling slightly. Without some soul power to support his body, his ability to let out spiritual power would also be affected. Elder Xian furrowed his brow. He couldn't help Hui Yuhao in the formation of his soul core. It could only be completed by the soul master himself. It seems like Yuhao won't be able to hang on. After all, his cultivation is too weak. Even if he has twin martial souls, his soul power is still not at the level of a title d'honneur. It seems like pure spiritual power is still insufficient to complete the formation of a soul core. However, he should be proud of himself for what he's achieved. After all, I was rank 88 when I reached his standard in the past. He's only rank 70 or so right now. The yellow light that Elder Xian released was getting stronger and stronger. He was ready to intervene. When Hui Yuhao couldn't hang on anymore, he would use his soul power to cage in Hui Yuhao's solid soul power before sending it high up into the air and detonating it. In this way, there shouldn't be much danger. However, Hui Yuhao would need a few days to recover after this experience. The drainage of his soul and spiritual power wasn't something that he could easily recover from. Hui Yuhao's body was already shaking tremendously by now. He was now relying on his willpower to hang on. The immense suction force kept on pulling his body forward. Once he couldn't hang on anymore, he might even be sucked in. A soul master couldn't possibly carry out such an experiment on his own. This was because the end result was death. This was why a soul master needed someone strong to protect him. A soul d'honneur had some ability to protect himself since his soul power had already reached a certain standard. Even so, there were many cases of soul d'honneur getting critically hurt as they tried to become a title d'honneur. Just as Elder Xian was ready to intervene, a beam of golden light shone behind Hui Yuhao's back. Following this, a ball of milky white light drilled out from his back. At the same time, a circular barrier appeared in front of him. It helped to isolate the suction force of the solid soul power. Life reflection shield. The ball of milky white light that appeared slowly took form and transformed into a huge ice worm. Rings of golden light patterns subtly appeared. The moment it appeared, a wave of pure soul power was poured into Hui Yuhao's body, stabilizing him. Brother Sky Dream. Hui Yuhao naturally knew the origin of this force. The Sky Dream Iceworm's voice sounded in his head. Continue. I'm here. The moment his voice was heard, the life reflection shield disappeared, and the suction force was felt again, but with the support of the Sky Dream Iceworm, Hui Yuhao managed to recover slightly. The soul power that the Sky Dream Iceworm poured into his body contained concentrated spiritual power. As it was released, the solid soul power's color intensified even more quickly. The gold turned bright gold. Spatial cracks also started to appear around it. The light coming from the Sky Dream Iceworm's body became stronger and stronger. Streaks of milky white light separated from his body and entered Hui Yuhao's body. There was a comforted look in the Sky Dream Iceworm's eyes. What Hu Hao didn't know was that the Sky Dream Iceworm had poured in the most origin strength that he had from his million-year cultivation into his body. This video will end here.